motherfucking relay. We're covering today's top boxing news.
Okay, we'll start with this. Current IBF bantamweight champion Shurretta Metcalf is now being advised by Jackie Callan, wants a hometown defense in Dallas. Shurretta Metcalf has now added Hall of Fame advisor Jackie Callan to her team. Metcalf, the current IBF women's bantamweight champion, has two goals: unification bouts and a fight in her hometown. She believes Callan, who was inducted into the International Boxing Hall of Fame last year, can get both done. Metcalf, 14-4 with one draw, 2 knockouts, explained how she met her new advisor. It happened after she won a unanimous decision over Miyo Yoshida to win the title in November. The circumstances around the fight were unique. I met her at my last fight, Metcalf told Boxing Scene. I already knew who she was because she's a legend in the sport. Metcalf, the 40-year-old from Dallas, explained that she had seen photos of Callan with fighters like Tommy Hearns and James Toney. Instantly, the two clicked. We hit it off, Metcalf said. After the conversation, Metcalf felt it would be a great fit for her. She messaged Callan on Facebook to see if she would be interested in helping her career. You can finish your career off with me. Metcalf recalled of their first phone call on Callan managing her career. The details and things that we're talking about aligned with my goals. I'm very grateful that she wanted to be on my team because at this point in Jackie's career, she doesn't have to just pick anybody to manage. She can pick and choose who she wants to work with. Up until this point, I have been disrespected with offers of $20,000 and $25,000, Metcalf said. I know for a fact the other champions in my division are getting way more than that. Metcalf now wants to bring her title home to Dallas for a defense. Her next rumored fight is expected to be in Australia, where she would make her first defense of the title against Viviana Ruiz Corredor. For now, the fight is not set. I want to have a homecoming fight, Metcalf said. I was supposed to be fighting in Australia. I don't know what's going on with that. Jackie is going to try to look into that for me and find out why this fight is so hard to get made. A few passing thoughts. Shurretta Metcalf wants to be paid in excess of the $20,000 and $25,000 that she's been offered in previous instances based on what other champions are making. The issue with that perspective is that pay in boxing is not uniform. It's not the same from one fighter to the next, from one champion to the next, as all these different athletes have different marquee value. They all generate different money, and thus
everybody ain't gonna make the same dough. That's how it is.
Because William Skull is a champion at the same weight as Canelo, that doesn't mean he makes what Canelo makes. That doesn't mean he's worth what Canelo is worth. So that has to be considered. She wants a homecoming fight, a homecoming defense.
Awesome. Who's going to pay for it?
I think that up until this point, Shurretta Metcalf has been boxing on Lou DiBella's shows. Lou DiBella, who promoted both the Miyo Yoshida fights as part of his Broadway boxing circuit.
I don't know for sure, but I get the sense that maybe she's not with Lou DiBella anymore.
And even if she is, scheduling a hometown fight is easier said than done. You're not putting on boxing matches for the sake of putting on boxing matches. You put up a dollar amount to do a homecoming fight, there has to be some hope of getting that money back.
So who's going to stake it? Who's going to risk it? Who's going to put up the dough to do a homecoming fight? That's a legitimate question.
There's nothing wrong with Shurretta wanting a homecoming fight, but to do it, it's going to take money, like everything else.
So who's going to put it up?
Because the money's got to come from somewhere. She mentioned the proposed Vivian Corredor fight in Australia that we touched on in passing in a previous video. I'd say that if that fight isn't yet set,
it's not made. That would leave the door open for a unification match in its place with one of the other two champions at the weight.
You say that you want to make more than just 20 or 25,000. You might be able to unifying titles with either Dina Thorslund or Shernika Johnson.
She could very well make in excess of $25,000 with either of them. The caveat is, Shurretta don't win those fights. And I've got nothing against Shurretta. She's a champion and she's accomplished. Seems like a great gal.
But she don't win those fights. Dina Thorslund has seen Shurretta Metcalf's style before.
Dealt with it before. In a younger, fresher fighter, a champion in Mexico's own Yuli Hangaluna, and she completely dominated Yuli Hang.
Outworked her, from the start of the fight to the end of the fight, that if what you're thinking is you're just going to get on the good foot and move from one end of the ring to the other, pot-shotting from the outside, Dina Thorslund has proven she can make the ring a very small place for a fighter that's trying to do that.
Dina's promoted by Most Valuable Promotions now, so with MVP behind her, they can put up the kind of money that Shurretta is looking for to make the fight between them, but it's not a fight that Shurretta wins.
I think something similar is true of Shurretta Johnson. Perhaps not as much money as she could make fighting Dina, but she could make more fighting Shurretta than she stands to make fighting Vivian. That if you're gonna go all the way out there to Australia, it may as well be for a unification match
than a voluntary title defense.
I think it's entirely possible that Shurretta Metcalf may be on the eve of her biggest fight purse in the entirety of her boxing career, but it would likely be for a fight that she loses, because I notice she don't like pressure.
She didn't look good in her last fight. A lot of people that took in her last fight, the one with Miyo Yoshida for the IBF title, had Miyo winning the fight. And what was Miyo doing? Closing the distance, throwing punches and bunches, applying pressure. Shurretta Metcalf got a gift.
Same thing Miyo Yoshida did is the same thing Shurretta and Dina would do, except they would be better at it, more coordinated.
They'd hit the gas the same way that Miyo did, with more educated pressure, educated footwork. It would be much harder for Shurretta, who's 40 years old, to get away from them.
You saw what Shurretta Johnson just did to a 40-year-old Nina Hughes at the start of their fight. She put her under a lot of pressure very early.
Dina Thorslund would do the exact same thing. And the both of these girls are younger girls than Shurretta, harder punchers than Shurretta.
So, I mean, she can get at the kind of money that she's looking for, but it's in fights where there's a good chance she loses.
Everybody can't get everything that they want. You have to take the good with the bad. And that's the bad part.
I think it's only a matter of time before one of the other two champions comes knocking at Shurretta Metcalf's door with an offer to come out and fight.
And I think she'll answer, because I think they'll make it worth her while, and that'll be the end of it.
We are now closer to an undisputed champion in the women's bantamweight division than we ever were in the past. We're closer to that now.
Why do we gotta try to fit square pegs into round holes, dude? Like, then we complain about the guy in the Middle East taking over boxing.
Dude,
you're selling garbage to garbage, man. You're selling garbage to garbage, man. Then you wonder why the guy in the Middle East talks about he's gonna take over. You're gonna put this BS on pay-per-view. Nobody's gonna care about it. People are gonna complain about it, and then you're gonna complain about the guy in the Middle East. He's taking the fights over there. Of course, he's taking the fights over there. Look at the garbage we're talking about putting on TV over here. You kidding me? This fight a couple of years ago, when the slap happened, the slap heard around the world. All right, bro. You time it right. That's it. The ship was on. All aboard. Get on board and let's ride, bro.
Watch this thing sell. Watch it sell.
This thing sailed so far already. It's already came back and picked up a new crew and went back out again. That's it. It's gone, bro.
We pull 60-year-old Mike Tyson at a fight. Come on, dude.
We're not
names sell, dude. Their names and they got beef. It'll sell. I'm telling you.
What names? Mike Tyson's Mike Tyson. He stands alone. You can't put Mike Tyson selling at 60
No
years
one's
old.
saying you can't do what you want to do.
How many losses does Charlo have? How many losses does Charlo have?
Not only did Charlo have, it doesn't matter.
Zero.
He's washing himself away. His last win is against Jose Benavidez, who his best years were at 140.
In 2023, by the way.
In 2023, by the way. Come on, dude.
Paulie and Chris are doing a good cop, bad cop thing. The way Paulie's talking sense, where Chris is playing devil's advocate. Plant versus Charlo is not a hot ticket. Caleb Plant by himself isn't box office, and perception of Jermall Charlo is in the tank. He's been out for over a year, last in action against the former welterweight who he didn't stop, who he didn't knock out, and he's in his mid-30s. He's been in a perpetual state of coming back for ages.
Yeah, pretty much every fight that he has is a comeback fight now.
And so he's supposed to be coming back on the undercard of Caleb Plant's upcoming fight in May. I believe that's how that's supposed to go. Don't know who Caleb is fighting, don't know who Jermall is fighting, but because they're on the same show, you get the sense they're trying to build a fight between them.
Don't know if that's going to be a pay-per-view, the fight in May, or if a fight between them later on would be billed as a pay-per-view. I just know that it shouldn't be. I agree with Paulie. That ain't box box office.
Some situation they had in a parking lot well over a year ago is not reason enough to put them in the ring here today. It's done. The moment is gone.
Chris Algieri brought up that Jermall Charlo is still an unbeaten fighter, but who gives a damn?
If being an unbeaten fighter, still being an unbeaten fighter mattered that much, then Demetrius Andrade would have been a bigger draw when he was still unbeaten. Jermall would be a bigger draw because he's still unbeaten. His unbeaten record, nobody cares.
Brought up Mike Tyson of all people. Mike Tyson is a cultural icon. Which one of these two guys is supposed to be the Mike Tyson of it?
So if what we're talking about here is a main event on pay-per-view at a price point of $80, you're dreaming. But perhaps as an undercard fight to a bigger main event with two bigger names, then you're cooking with rice. Now that isn't really likely to happen.
Jermall Charlo is so sparsely active that he had to give up his WBC middleweight title.
Might be unbeaten, but he's not a champion anymore. He's not even active. His career has no traction, no buzz. So he's a long way from building himself back up. Now, beating a former champion like himself in Caleb Plant could help to get him there, but the fight itself is not so big an attraction that you can make it a main event as a pay-per-view. That ain't gonna work.
No dice.
I think that Caleb has a bit more traction right now, just a smidge, more than Jermall Charlo. The issue for Caleb is that the biggest fights for him involve other fighters that are on other sides of the street, where he's still at the PBC, and the most they have to offer him is a Charlo fight.
Give me a break.
The American boxing scene has to do better because it's dying on the vine, and propositions like this one are a big part of why.
Gotta do better.
As it pertains to another potential rival, a potential Edgar Berlanga versus Caleb Plant fight, Edgar has his sights set on somebody else, not Caleb. Edgar said the Munguia fight is much bigger. Caleb Plant is a good fight, but you've got a young guy my age who has all of Mexico behind him. I'm looking to knock out Munguia in the first round.
As you can imagine, Caleb Plant did not like the idea that he could be relegated to a second-tier fight, a second-string fight, to a Munguia fight.
He reacted by saying Berlanga, Charlo, Munguia could all fight each other in any order, and none of those fights would be as big as any of them. Fighting me is what's 100. I've brought in more views, more pay-per-views, have done bigger gates, bigger numbers, I've fought more world champions, and I've delivered more exciting fights.
Yeah, that's nice, but you fighting Edgar isn't bigger than Jaime fighting Edgar.
It's just like Edgar Berlanga says, which is saying a lot because I don't often agree with that guy, but I do agree on this. Him fighting Munguia is bigger because that's yet another installment of the long-standing Mexico versus Puerto Rico rivalry. Two factions of fans that are fiercely loyal to their fighters, the Puerto Ricans on the East Coast and the Mexicans on the West. Berlanga versus Munguia is bigger than Berlanga versus Plant.
Well, okay, then what the hell is Caleb supposed to do? You say that a Charlo fight doesn't move the needle while Edgar puts him on the back burner for a Munguia fight. What is Caleb supposed to do?
One thing that he can do to get people talking and create a bit of a stir is change his decorum. You're still over there at the PBC fighting God knows who in May. Who's supposed to be excited about that? You just fought in a tune-up fight in your last fight with Trevor McCumbee, so the ideal progression would be something bigger. And if you can't get something bigger, then go somewhere else. You can make news for that.
Change your decorum. Go to Matchroom.
They've got some stake in the super middleweight division. They've got unbeaten Diego Pacheco.
Go to Top Rank.
They've got some stake in the super middleweight division. They've got both Christian Mabili and Jaime Munguia. You don't change your decorum, I don't know what you expect people to be excited about. Watching you fight a past it Jermall Charlo, who's battling drug addiction and whatever else?
Please.
Over to Edgar Berlanga, who's putting Caleb on the back burner for a potential Jaime Munguia fight. Jaime Munguia, who's going to be in action on the undercard of Canelo versus Skull, seeking vengeance against France's own Bruno Sarace, who knocked him out in what was the upset of the year last year.
I'm 100% sure Jaime's gonna win, so I'm not gonna spend a lot of time on that. He'll take him seriously this time, and he'll take him out.
But a part of the reason that Edgar's piping up and pursuing that fight, perhaps more than the Plant fight, is because how could Jaime get knocked out by a Frenchman with only 4 knockouts? A guy who's not known for power, not known for knockouts, he's not known at all. At least he wasn't before the Munguia fight.
Edgar is telling himself, if a guy with 4 knockouts can knock you out, I can knock you out.
You never know, he might be right. How many of us were expecting that Bruno Sarace, of all people, would be the first to stop Jaime where Canelo did not?
And the boxing world on its head with that one.
So where before it may have seemed like a foregone conclusion that Jaime Munguia would steamroll Edgar Berlanga, now there is a question mark. Because while I don't have a high opinion of Edgar, I don't think he's very good, I do think he punches harder than Bruno.
Bruno knocked you out.
It actually makes the fight between them more intriguing that Jaime seems more vulnerable now. He's got to get revenge, then he can move into that Edgar Berlanga fight. Edgar's a free agent now. Rumor has it he could be going to MVP.
He just completed his Matchroom contract in what was the final fight of that deal. Now he's free to go wherever he wants to go, and the rumor mill says he may go to MVP. It's not a bad fit. MVP's in bed with Netflix.
Could you imagine how much bigger a Berlanga versus Munguia fight could be if it's on Netflix? How many more people would get to see it on a platform that size? Netflix these days is tantamount to a terrestrial network because they have just as much reach as a terrestrial network. 300 million homes.
That's huge.
Well, I know it's a streaming platform. I know it's an app, but it's an app that has an interest in hosting live sports.
It's an app with the capacity of a terrestrial network.
So if you did a Berlanga versus Munguia fight on Netflix with the same structure that you did Mike Tyson versus Jake Paul, you might bring in astronomical numbers with that. You have to go back to making boxing accessible. Accessible to the common man because it's a common man's sport. It's a poor man's sport. You can't keep treating it like it's a luxury item.
That's why the audience for it started shrinking in America.
Didn't get bigger over time, it got smaller. Boxing is at its best. Really, all organized sports are at their best when they are immediately accessible to as many people as possible.
But then how do you make money?
Size of the audience, genius. NFL brings in on average anywhere in between 15, 16, 17 million viewers, and you can do that with boxing. You actually can, but you have to make it accessible.
Look at the numbers for Taylor versus Serrano 2 on Netflix. There's your example. With an audience that size,
You don't even have to resort to billing everything as a pay-per-view if you can bring in an audience that size. And Katie and Amanda proved they can on Netflix. I think Edgar and Jaime could do something similar.
if Netflix is really interested in hosting live sport, boxing matches, that's one that could move the needle for them.